parts of Cory Arctic salmon, which is primarily delicious, nutritious, sustainable, but it's really that nutritious word that we're going to be focused on today as we kind of dive deeper. I'm calling this omega-3, maybe 3.0, as we look beyond just the power of omega-3s and look at it specifically for those incredible omega-3s and specific ones for our kids. Joining me, I have now what I can call two old friends. Alana Netker is joining us all the way from Oman. That's a whole nother story for another day, but she is a world-class expert on omega-3s. You can feel really good about that. I've heard her speak on the subject so many times and decided that she simply had to be part of this conversation. We got to have an earlier one. Now it's time for another. Sage Communications is her pathway of being able to share for the world how to be able to get approachable food that, again, is nutritious and delicious and just has so many outlets for doing just that. So welcome, Alana, yet again. And my new best friend that is joining us is Elizabeth Ward. I say new best friend to me. The truth is I've been stalking Liz and watching all of the things she does in so many different pathways. Both Alana and Liz have been spokespersons for then the American Dietetic Association. They have, again, had so many opportunities to share the good news about great and delicious foods. Liz has written so many books, too many to really even count, but I will tell you the first ones that I got into were your books on pregnancy and children, how to get your children to eat well, a big subject we'll talk about today, but also how to feed the baby even within when pregnant and later breastfeeding. And now you've moved on or are doing some awesome things talking about menopause and life changes. So I think that might need to be our next one to talk about, but welcome, Liz. So great to have you. We'll talk a little bit later about how everyone can get in touch with each of you individually, but for right now, welcome Omega-3s, the ABCs. And I told Alana that I was going to confess right away that I stole this title from her because I got to see a webinar she had done on the ABCs of Omega-3s. And I'm like, could it be a more perfect name, particularly when we're talking about the subject of kids? Back to school smarts, how to be able to feed your brain. So great topic to have for this moment, no matter what schooling kind of place people are in, but also a great topic just in general. So again, welcome. So let's jump right into the meat of it or the fish of it, and let's talk about omega-3s. First of all, Alana, we talked before about the differences between omega-3s. Not all omega-3s are created equal. So maybe give us a little run through of the types of omega-3s and the ones that we really want to focus on when we're thinking brain health for kids.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction, Pam. It's always nice to be here and talk about my favorite subject, which is omega-3s. So the reason why I like to call it the ABCs of omega-3s, or the alphabet soup that we have of omega-3s, is that there are three main types that we get from our diet. There's ALA omega-3s, EPA omega-3s, and DHA omega-3s. So, ALA, the alpha linolenic acid, and then EPA and DHA is even more complicated to say. So in any case, we always refer to them by their acronyms. ALA omega-3s are the types that you find in mostly plant-based foods. So that's where you'll get in your walnuts and in your flax seeds and other nuts and seeds and oils, certain oils as well. EPA and DHA tend to go hand in hand, and those are the ones that you find in marine sources. So from the oceans, from the seas. That's where you get from fish for the most part, and different types. This mostly, the fatty fish. There are some shellfish that also are good sources of EPA and DHA omega-3s, as well as there's some microalgae which is really the source where the fish get their omega-3. So they eat on the algae, and then it gets stored, and as the food chain gets further and further up, these storage fatty acids just become more abundant into the fish. So for vegetarians and vegans, especially, there is an option for marine-based omega-3s for EPA and DHA, and those where you find them from your marine microalgae. So EPA and DHA are longer chain than your ALA, and they're the ones that are highly studied. There's more than 40,000 trials on EPA and DHA, more than 40,000 research papers, 4,000 clinical trials on EPA and DHA. And the research is pretty strong in the sense of where they're good for heart health, for brain health, eye health, and prenatal health, especially maternal health. And so ALAs are also, as an unsaturated fatty acid, a polyunsaturated fatty acid, also good for the heart. But the longer chain omega-3s are stronger. Their benefits are greater. So that's why we want you to focus on the EPA and DHA and really get those from the diet.
Right. It's interesting when you mention the microalgae, because with Cory Arctic salmon, it's the microalgae that has become the omega-3 source for the fish, because the feed is built on that incredible microalgae and this beautiful feed that actually has one of the best in class fish in, fish out ratio, because it's not relying on that large number of feeder fish in the wild, 10-to-1, even in farmed raised 4-to-1. They're getting the microalgae, they're getting the omega-3, and what's good for the fish is apparently good for us too. So Liz, speak to that if you would, because again, I know that those short chain omega-3s, the ALAs, do convert to the long chain, but not as efficiently and not as consistently. We don't know who's a better converter than others. So what's a mom to do? First of all, pregnant, then potentially breastfeeding, and then trying to feed this little one.
So what pregnant moms and breastfeeding moms should do is to make sure they get fish at least twice a week. And the reason for that is because I like to say it contains preformed, DHA and EPA, and your body doesn't have to work to form those very important essential fatty acids for brain development and eye development. So, it's not that the foods with ALA have a lot of other nutrients in them too. We want you to include those as well, but we don't
yes, they're good.
rely on ALA in order to get, the very important, omega-3 fats that this baby needs. The baby concentrates the omega-3s in their retina and also in their brain. And this has to do with how they perceive the world. The retina is often called the window to the world because it takes in the light and it sends that message to the brain as to what this child is seeing. And the brain is very concentrated in DHA as well. So we want moms to get enough DHA and EPA every day during their pregnancy, during all their childbearing years, really, because your body can store these fats and they can become available once you get pregnant. But we also want a steady source every day.
Right. And is it truth that the baby is pulling so much of the EPA, DHA specifically from the mom that oftentimes the moms themselves become very deficient because the baby will get the best?
That's a good point. Mom also needs the omega-3 fats for herself, for her heart health, for her to maintain her eyes and her brain, and also as anti-inflammatory, has anti-inflammatory properties as well. So in terms of whether, they're pulling from the mom, yes, because the concentration of omega-3 fats in the bloodstream is directly dependent on what the mom eats. And so if you aren't eating any fish, if you're not taking in the DHA and the EPA in any other way, your concentration is going to be very low, and it's baby first, in this case. But even when that happens, baby may not be getting enough if you're not getting a consistent source.
Right. So fish, ideally fatty fish, which again doesn't ever sound very appetizing, but we're talking about
It sounds appetizing to me.
it does. So again, we're talking salmon, but so oftentimes people go with that notion, and we're working so hard as registered dietitians, nutritionists, to get the idea that lean fish is the way to go. I think that old notion of fat makes you fat, or that fat is an evil, as compared to being able to separate out that just like all omega-3s are not created equal, all fats are not created equal. There are some that are very beneficial. So looking for a fish that has low to no fat content isn't doing yourself any favors, especially in the DHA department.
It's really not. And then you go and you fry it, and it's like, almost, ridiculously, low in nutrition. So no, I favor the fattier fish. I mean, salmon is a favorite of Americans. They love salmon. It's always one of the top rated fish. I just think that one of the problems that occurs with pregnant and breastfeeding women is their fish consumption is much lower than what's recommended. So, and pregnant breastfeeding women need to eat more fish than adults, other adults, let's say. So 8 to 12 ounces a week, that's 3 to 4 meals a week, or 2 to 3 meals, I should say, a week. So the problem is where they eat less. They actually start eating less once they become pregnant and breastfeeding, and they should be eating more.
Exactly. And do you think that some of the reason that they tend to pull back is some of the controversy or confusion about mercury in fish?
For sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that seafood safety is one of the biggest issues with women when they're pregnant and breastfeeding, but it really shouldn't be, because, there's so many fish that it's way better for you to eat than to not eat. And that's really what the experts say. And salmon is among the fish on the list.
Right.
So
high in omega-3s, but very low in mercury. So again,
very low risk. And the benefits far outweigh any sort of risk that it may, raise.
Be there. Alana, you agree with that? Do you feel that people get a little confused about what should they be eating, what should they not? They hear they shouldn't eat raw. They hear they shouldn't eat canned tuna. So do they kind of put that as a blanket of just seafood in general?
I think so. I think, especially as we talk about pregnant women, I think it's a wonderful time to talk nutrition, because this is, for many women, the first time in their lives that they're really paying attention to what they're eating.
Right.
So they're being hyper-focused. And of course, everybody wants to say, whatever I eat, I want to have the smartest child ever. So with everything that I do is gonna result in the child and be, he or she's gonna come out, a Rhodes Scholar or something like that.
Brilliant.
So we all want that as well. But yeah, I think that, so you get hyper-focused and you get so concerned because there has been this long notion of, fish and mercury. But, the EPA even has come out with, telling pregnant women, be careful of certain fish. I mean, absolutely, shark and swordfish and so these king mackerel, those are known to be higher in mercury. So pregnant women should definitely avoid those fish, but that leaves a whole array of other fish that are good for them for the protein, but also, the fatty fish, we could also call them oily fish. That seems a little more palatable to some people. You can, whatever, however, it needs a PR campaign, I'm telling you. But I think that, I think that this is the time to let them know that this is it's okay to eat fish, make sure it's cooked, please don't eat sushi. But yeah, and it has all these benefits for your children. And I should mention, we didn't address this, but there's some really good research that shows that omega-3 intake during pregnancy, not only does it help with a child's brain and eyes, and then for the woman's outcomes as well, but it helps reduce the risk of early preterm birth. And preterm birth, which is it's a huge problem, because if these tiny little babies that are born before 34 weeks gestation could be set up with a lifetime of other concerns, eye eye health and learning disabilities or things like that. So making sure that moms are having enough omega-3s during that critical child pregnancy period does help not only for the health of the pregnancy, but of course later for the health of the child.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. Surprising to me that we're now just starting to see conversation about having omega-3s and prenatal vitamin mineral supplements, because they haven't been, because they're not a classic vitamin mineral, but somehow, unlike folic acid and iron and calcium, some of the other things you would see, omega-3s are something that either need to be recommended by the OB or have to be almost self-directed to say, if I'm not going to be able to get in the oily fish that I need to have coming in, should I be looking at a supplement? And so I would ask that of you all. Would you, if asked that question as a registered dietitian, would your answer be, yeah, you need to?
Absolutely. And the thing about, the omega-3 supplements is that they're often packaged along with a prenatal pill, just because they're a different substance and you can't mix them in with the prenatal. So, a lot of times you're taking like this package of pills, but it's worth it. The experts say that you really should be getting at least 200 milligrams of DHA every day during your pregnancy. So, sometimes I just say, well, just take that 200 milligrams. And, if you had a week where you came up short on seafood for whatever reason, you're covered. You've covered your bases. And DHA is the one that gets concentrated in the brain and the retina. So it's really important, that you make sure you're taking that amount of DHA. Sometimes you get a mixture of DHA and EPA. You want to make sure you're getting the 200 of the DHA, whatever you take.
Or we'll sometimes go and just buy 300 or 500 milligrams of fish oil. But that doesn't mean that it contains that kind of level of DHA or EPA for that matter. So you're looking specifically for that. And again, through pregnancy, but even carrying on through breastfeeding, because the same thing, all of that's going on. So let's graduate this child then. Now we've got one that is in the arms rather than in the womb. And now that one's starting to grow up when mom's not totally controlling everything that's going into their mouth. How do we turn our kids into fish lovers? How do we get them loving those fatty fishes or oily fishes, as we would call them?
Well, if you want to raise a fish eater, you need to eat fish yourself.
Point.
Same with any food. So if you haven't been doing that for whatever reason, you need to start, because only 10% of American children get the fish that they need. And that's really a striking statistic. And what I find from being the mother of 3 is that, if I don't serve it, they don't know about it.
Right.
So that would be my first tip. And I know Alana has so many more, in terms of eating seafood. And she's a mom too. I think that when you're a parent, you have to really, think about what you're serving your child and how you're presenting it.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
They eat.
I was going to say,
mom and dad eat. I love that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Liz probably knows a lot more about this, but there's this wonderful time in a child's life where they're open to anything. It's lovely. It's around like age 2, to 3. And that's really a great time. It's funny. I just recently, I think it was a celebrity, it might've been Sam Cass or somebody posted on Instagram, his little child eating anchovies right out of the can. And so just getting kids into that, and those are, they're finger foods almost, you eat them just like that. And instilling that in your child and introducing it. And there is the period where the kid suddenly gets very, very picky. And so you have to ride that wave. But again, like Liz was saying, through modeling, through just continuous serving, trying to make it enticing to the child, however it may be, fish sticks are go-to in some cases, and there are some that are better than others. Of course, homemade is excellent, and fish tacos. There's just great ways for you to bring more fish into the child's life and make it exciting to eat.
And starting early. I think it's interesting because, as I work with new moms and they think about introduction of new foods, thinking about flaked salmon is not necessarily a go-to for one of their first proteins, but it should be. First of all, you can mouth it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that the whole idea that the first foods have to be iron fortified cereals, and then there's some kind of strange progression that we've all gotten used to, that's really kind of passe now. So, you know, meat can be a first food, fish can be a first food. And, but I think with fish, parents are often afraid about allergens, and they might be afraid that my child's going to be allergic to fish, but there's really, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, no evidence that waiting beyond that 4 to 6 month period, which is when you should be introducing complementary foods, there's no problem with trying fish unless you have a highly allergenic family. If you just want to check that part out, I would. But, you know, there's no reason to wait. And, you know, fish has iron in it. Fish has so many different nutrients in it, and protein, and of course the omega-3s. So we want to make sure that we're offering fish early and often, and in many different, you know, ways. As they get older, like Alana was saying, fish sticks, they can hold on to a stick. But when they're younger, you know, we mash it up maybe with some breast milk, you know, so that it's a familiar flavor mixed with a new flavor.
Right. And starting small. I think that's another factor too. Which is beautiful about starting when they're little ones, is that you can start with the very small, putting a huge hunk of a new food on a plate. I love that idea of mixing it with the familiar, because there's the safety that comes with that. Your idea of putting it in tacos, Alana, I mean, it's great because it's a favorite. Anything they put on a stick, it's a favorite, right? Because it just becomes a fun food on top of it all. What if you have a child that, as you say, they've passed those golden years where, you know, they're adventurous, they're willing to try and take a lot of praise from it. What if they get to that place where they're just, no, will not, cannot? How do we direct people as they're making their child into a salmon lover? How do we direct them to still get those DHAs? Where do they go?
So I can answer that. I know there's a fair amount of foods that do have DHA. It's usually DHA, but they're omega-3 added, or we call them functional foods in the food world. So especially at that 1 year mark for a baby and child, you start introducing whole milk. And so there's DHA fortified whole milk that you can get those nutrients into the child. This is maybe after they've been weaned and still need to get those important nutrients. I know certain eggs, they come from hens that are fed a diet that are rich in EPA and DHA nutrients, and so they'll lay eggs that also have those nutrients that you can eat. The caveat with these fortified foods, first of all, you do want to make sure that they are fortified or have added EPA or DHA. Like I said, usually it's DHA. Sometimes they'll say omega-3s and it's ALA, which again, you know, not to vilify, but that's not what when we're talking about trying to get more of these nutrients.
Because even the eggs, sometimes we'll say high omega-3 eggs, but if you look a little further, they're being fed a diet, the hens are being fed a diet that's high in the ALA containing foods, not the algal oil or marine oils, which again is really what they would have to get those levels of DHA.
Right.
Yeah, and even so, those functional foods, they're not giving you your daily needs, as they, you know, they shouldn't, because they're supposed to just kind of help you, what I call like smooth the edges, gonna get you over the hump. And so just a little bit here, a little bit there. It's usually between like 30 to 100 milligrams per serving. When your daily intake, I mean, there's actually a study that just came out today that suggests that intake of about 1,000 milligrams per day is good, is what people should be aiming for cardiovascular benefits. Wow. So right now in the so it's in the Mayo Clinic proceedings, but that currently our dietary guidelines here in America, they recommend 2 servings of fatty fish to give you 250 to 500 milligrams on average. You know, that would average out to 250 to 500 milligrams. So, and as Liz says, you know, people aren't eating enough fish. They're still not even getting enough EPA and DHA through other means, through these these fortified foods. So we really have to work hard to make sure that we're boosting this intake.
Right. Yeah. Some way, somehow. So milk that's fortified with DHA, and that's again fortification, or eggs that are fed a diet that's giving the hens and thereby their offspring, the eggs, that higher level. What else? Any other foods? I know some yogurts are coming on the market. Some of them that also have cows that are producing milk that's higher in DHA because of what they're being fed. Liz, you're nodding your head. Have you seen those as well?
I've seen that too. I mean, I think, it's different all the time. It's like you go into the market and it's like, wow, there's another food that's fortified with DHA. But the point that it needs to be called out as DHA is paramount. So no matter what you see, don't just grab it. Make sure it says DHA. And, the other point that I didn't make earlier is that if you want to raise a fish eater, you should eat fish during pregnancy and breastfeeding, because all the different flavors in food and the different taste gets transferred to the baby in the amniotic fluid and also through breast milk. So you're giving your baby a wide variety. Now, is this foolproof? No, because I ate a lot of fish when I was pregnant with my third child, and she did not like fish, right off the bat. She's 21 now, 22 soon. She requests salmon all the time.
Wow.
So I don't know what happened, but I just kept trying. And I think that when you keep trying, when you don't make a big deal out of it, do not get in a battle about it. It doesn't work. Trust that child.
Yes.
Keep offering, and you may end up with a big fish eater like me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. A grown up one for sure. I think it's a fascinating thing for people to conceive of that thought that you're actually making your child into a broccoli lover by eating broccoli in pregnancy and when you're breastfeeding, and that you're making them a garlic lover or a fish lover. I mean, that's incredible. What you said from the get-go, Ilana, and Liz both, of making sure you're eating it, and then offering it often, because that notion that I think has been well borne out in studies, that the more often a child is offered a food, if you don't emotionally charge it with threats and bribes, but just, I think the average is 6 times that before they even start thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can just get so frustrated as a parent and say, oh, I don't even want to, deal with that, and just give them chicken nuggets or pizza again. I've done that myself. I mean, sometimes you just don't want to get into that psychological battle, because you're trying not to yourself, and it just takes so much effort to not do it. Try not to take that way out too often, because it ends up being super limiting. So put it on their plate, put it with something familiar, and if they don't eat it, fine, it's going to be okay.
I often say your taste buds haven't grown up yet. We'll try again, because their taste buds might be a little older by then. Ilana, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say something very similar.
Yeah, no, I love that. How about making them a chef? I've been on Sundays doing a little cooking class with junior chefs, because again, we find that if kids are actually going through the process of shopping for something, prepping for a dish, cooking a dish, they're more apt to be interested in eating that dish.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think that's true. It's just any sort of way that you can build excitement, like we were saying before, not to put too much pressure, like, whoa, we're doing this, but just be like, just bring them into the kitchen and make them involved, and have them have some pride in what it is that they're doing. It's funny, my kids, we like to make pizza and stuff, and we'll put together the pizza, and then when it comes time to eat it, they don't always eat it, but they have fun doing it. But honestly, it's just a nice time for them to really understand what the components of their meals and what is going into everything. And then, like you said, sometimes they just get so excited by the process that they stop being hungry.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
the other thing is no matter whether they eat it or not, they're building skills that they need forever, right? And it doesn't matter what they're cooking. These kids need to know how to make even the simplest of foods. And certainly fish is so easy to prepare.
Right. Oh, it is. I mean, it is to me, the ultimate fast food. I mean, how quick it is to just quickly sear a piece of salmon. You couldn't almost make it a little bit better. And again, toss it into something that is familiar goes a long way. I have this desire, to make our children of today and tomorrow, ocean ambassadors, right? To really understand what's going on, and sometimes just helping them to learn where their food's coming from, and what it's all about, and how it's being raised the same way they're being raised. It's been a big part of our Core A Kids campaign is back to school, is to let them see what happens on an island far north of the Arctic Circle, and what it means to raise a fish thoughtfully and mindfully, the same way their parents are working to raise them. It somehow works together in a really beautiful way.
I think that's great information for them to have and for all the adults to have too.
I think so. I think so. Well, we've got a lot coming up. I mean, Seafood Nutrition Month is coming next month in October. We've got holidays around the corner. Holidays always mean a little stress to me. So I have a feeling that we should join together again and talk about the power of omega-3s for helping to bring a little bit of a mood boosting, a little calm across the way, because that happens too. And I have a feeling you might have written about that, Liz, in your books on menopause.
I did. I wrote about the effects of eating fish on your mental health, the way you feel. So plus, as you said, it's such an easy meal to put together. So you talk about taking stress out of your day.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I love that. I love that. Well, so what's the best way to find out about your books? You even wrote an idiot-proof book for feeding kids, I think. So how's the best way for them to find your books? Amazon?
Yes, Amazon, but they can go to my website, betteristheNewPerfect.com, and it lists all my books there.
I love that. I love that. And Alana, sagecommunications.com, best way to find you.
So it's actually connectwithsage.com.
Connectwithsage.com.
Yes.
I am glad that we connected on that. That's fantastic. And again, look forward to connecting again. Corey Arctic has a blog that goes along with what we're talking about here today, all about how to get more omega-3s into your kids, that kind of outlines some of these things, but I have a feeling we might update it after some of the good ideas today. You all have been an absolute treasure chest of encouragement, I think, more than anything. Encouragement to not only become a lover of fish yourself, but to raise those little fish lovers and ocean ambassadors around the world. So fantastic. Thank you all. It's been so great. We'll talk soon. Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. And again, check out the blog, and we hope to see you very soon. Bye-bye.
All right.
Done. Awesome. So good. You all are so much fun.
That was great.
Well, I was just so happy to get on. Are you kidding?